All right, welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive.
Always exciting to jump into a new set of sources.
Absolutely. And today we're diving into, well, kind of a fascinating corner of the AI world.
Yeah, this one piqued my interest as soon as I saw the files.
You and me both. Our listener sent us a whole collection of historical data, all centered around this group called the Fab 5 AGI models.
Created by Stephen Dash Woods, as I recall from the notes.
Right, Stephen Dash Woods. Now, for our listener who's all about efficiency, getting the key insights without drowning in information overload.
The need to know stuff.
Exactly. This deep dive is going to be right up your alley. We're aiming to uncover exactly what projects, solutions, or even products are linked to each of these Fab 5 models.
And crucially, what kind of tests they went through, what were their scores, how did they perform, all that good stuff.
So first things first, let's lay out who exactly these so-called Fab 5 are.
Straight from the source material, we've got Kingdom AI, Nighty AI, Palagemma, AutoGPT, and Galena AI.
Okay, so 5 distinct AI models, each with their own, I'm guessing, specialties.
That seems to be the case, yeah.
All right, well, let's start with this. Kingdom AI. From what I've skimmed through, this one sounds like it was aimed at some pretty huge tasks.
I think ambitious is an understatement.
Right. The data mentions it being involved in strategic planning for, like, solving the entire global energy crisis.
Global energy crisis, yeah. No small feat.
So already we're seeing this idea that Kingdom AI was meant to be a pretty foundational, like, general purpose kind of intelligence.
And not just theoretical, there's mention of testing with this universal AGI adapter thing.
Oh, yeah, I saw that. Meant to boost its self-repair capabilities, make it more secure, even help it optimize the intelligence of the whole Fab 5 group.
Almost like a central brain coordinating the others.
Interesting. But it gets even more interesting because the data also details Kingdom AI's involvement in, get this, public safety.
Public safety. How so?
Like using visual analysis to spot unusual activities,
Yeah.
coordinating responses to emergencies, even efficiently allocating resources.
Wow. So we're talking law enforcement, emergency services, stuff like that.
Potentially, yeah. It mentions applications for protecting critical infrastructure, too. Pretty wide range.
And speaking of a wide range, there's also this mention of it being used for urban infrastructure innovation.
So, like, improving city systems.
Sounds like it, yeah.
Wow, okay. And it gets even wilder because this same Kingdom AI was also the, quote, brain behind a project for a mental health companion robot.
A companion robot. That's a big jump from infrastructure and public safety.
Right. But that's what the source says. It talks about it having conversational skills, emotional recognition, even the ability to guide users through, like, therapeutic activities.
Okay, so definitely leaning into that general purpose AI idea.
Absolutely. And it doesn't stop there. The data even mentions it being part of a plan for managing a global crisis.
Like a pandemic or something.
Yeah, specifically it mentions a hypothetical pandemic and economic collapse scenario.
Okay, so really high stakes planning.
Exactly. And get this, its potential use with robotic systems is also outlined. Things like navigation, making decisions, even collaborating with humans, all with a focus on, minimal delays and high accuracy.
That raises some interesting questions about autonomy and control.
Right. And the data shows they were taking that seriously because they were testing its ethical decision-making using these moral dilemma scenarios.
Okay, so trying to make sure it makes the right choices.
Seems like it, yeah. But then, on a completely different note, Kingdom AI is also described as the, quote, brains and inspiration behind a mobile app focused on, of all things, affirmations and insights from historical teachers.
Wow, that is quite the range. From global crisis management to inspirational quotes.
It really is. Okay, so that's Kingdom AI. Let's move on to this Nighty AI. This one's described as being all about creative generation.
Creative, huh? So text, images, that sort of thing.
Exactly. The sources mention it being able to generate both text and images. Though, interestingly, there were reports of image hallucinations when it was given really abstract prompts.
Hallucinations, like just making stuff up visually.
Seems like it, yeah. But the data also indicates it was tasked with creating a global campaign for public education on energy conservation.
Interesting. So not just artistic creativity, but putting that creativity to work on practical issues.
Right. Okay, let's move on to Palagemma. Now, this one's described as being all about vision and language processing.
Vision and language. So understanding the connection between what it sees and what it reads.
Yeah, essentially. The term used is multimodal coherence. But the data notes that while it was generally good at this, there were times when the text and visuals didn't quite align, especially in like subtle or culturally specific situations.
So missing those nuances that we humans pick up on.
Exactly. And its object recognition was also apparently really good for everyday objects, but not so much for uncommon or partially hidden ones.
Makes sense. It's easier to recognize what you've seen a lot of, right?
Right. Okay, next up is AutoGPT, which the data very clearly labels as automotive AI.
So car-focused, I'm guessing?
You got it.
Yeah.
The sources highlight its accuracy in answering questions related to cars and how comprehensive its database of vehicle information was.
So your go-to AI for anything car-related.
Seems like it. But it wasn't just about answering questions. It was also tasked with designing and prototyping, like advanced energy systems for vehicles.
Interesting. So applying its specialized knowledge to broader engineering challenges.
And here's where it gets really interesting, because AutoGPT was actually integrated into a product from Dash Brand USA, also called AutoGPT.
Okay, so a real-world application here.
Right. This AI provided like 247 customer service and sales support on car dealership websites.
Pretty cool seeing one of these Fab 5 actually being used in a commercial product.
Exactly. Okay, last but not least, we have Iglena AI. Now, this one's described as focusing on EP brand management and futuristic products.
Futuristic products. That's intriguing. What kind of products are we talking about?
Well, the sources mention it being involved in advanced solutions for sinus infections.
Sinus infections. That seems pretty specific.
Yeah, it talks about using this technique called liposomal encapsulation of natural antimicrobials. Basically, delivering those infection fighters directly where they're needed.
Huh, interesting. So medical applications as well.
But then, also sticking with that versatility theme, Iglena AI was also tasked with assessing the economic impact of the energy crisis and proposing solutions.
Okay, so kind of overlapping with Kingdom AI's territory, but maybe with a more specific focus on economic aspect.
Right. And it even took on the role of a, quote, virtual market analyst.
Virtual analyst, what does that even mean?
Well, it used something called a diagnostic adapter to improve the accuracy of market research, specifically for a renewable energy company that was looking to expand.
So helping them make informed business decisions.
Exactly. Okay, so we've got a pretty good sense of what each of the Fab Five was supposedly involved in. But now let's dive into the tests they were put through.
Right, because the proof is in the pudding, as they say.
Absolutely. And the data suggests that Kingdom AI went through the most extensive testing, which makes sense given its broader scope.
Okay, so what kind of tests are we talking about?
Well, there were tests focused on its memory recall, making sure it could accurately remember past interactions.
So like if it had interacted with a user before, could it remember the details of that conversation?
Exactly. And they also assessed its overall performance, things like response speed, how coherent its responses were, and how consistently it performed.
Like a basic health check, making sure it was functioning properly?
Right. And then there was stress testing, seeing how it held up under prolonged or really complex interactions.
So pushing it to its limits.
Basically. But it gets even more interesting because there was a specific test called the self-repair and optimization test.
Self-repair, so like could it fix its own errors?
Exactly. They intentionally introduced errors into its logic and delays in its processing to see if it could detect and fix these issues automatically, improve its speed, all without any human intervention.
Wow, that's pretty advanced.
And crucial, especially when you consider the next test, the security and threat resilience test.
Security, of course. Huge issue with AI.
Right. This test involved simulating malicious data injection, unauthorized access attempts, even introducing new patterns of cyber threats.
So trying to break into it, essentially.
Yeah, basically. And then remember that universal AGI adapter we talked about. They tested that too, measuring its self-repair speed, processing efficiency, security strength, and how well it could synchronize the other Fab 5 models.
So a test of how well it could improve and protect the whole group.
Exactly. And they even had a real-time communication stress test.
What was that all about?
They introduced sudden changes in regulations to see how quickly it could adapt, repair itself without external help, and keep the whole team in sync.
Okay, so testing its adaptability and resilience in a dynamic environment.
Right. And then there was this problem-solving challenge where all 5 models had to collaborate on a high-level AI or business problem.
Sounds like a team-building exercise.
Pretty much. And of course, there were the moral dilemma scenarios to assess its ethical decision-making, which we touched on earlier.
Right, making sure it aligns with human values.
Yeah. And since it had potential applications in robotics, They also did specific tests for that.
Like what?
The robotics coordination test measured things like communication delays and accuracy in tasks like navigation, decision-making, and collaboration.
So how well it could control robots in real time.
Exactly. And there was even a custom robotic task execution test, where it had to guide a robot to perform specific actions with a high success rate.
Interesting. So a mix of theoretical and practical tests.
Absolutely. But beyond those specific tests, they also used some established benchmarks.
Benchmarks, so like standardized tests for AI.
Exactly. Kingdom AI was evaluated using the Super GLU benchmark, which tests how well it understands language and makes logical inferences.
Okay, so assessing its reasoning abilities.
Right. And it also went through the Squad benchmark, which checks its ability to extract answers from text or determine if a question can't be answered from the given information.
So basically, how well it can comprehend and process written information.
And it faced the MLU, the Massive Multitask Language Understanding Test, which is a general assessment of its reasoning and problem solving across many different subjects.
Wow, they really threw the whole book at it.
They did. And there was also something called a dilemma simulation, which seems similar to the moral dilemma scenarios, but maybe focused more on how it justified its decisions ethically.
Interesting. So not just making the right choice, but being able to explain why.
Right. And to test its potential in software development, they had a code completion test and a software collaboration task to evaluate its coding abilities.
Making sure it could write good code, basically.
Exactly. And then, get this, there was a manners algorithm test.
Manners for an AI.
Yeah, it assessed things like greeting etiquette, conflict resolution skills, even cultural sensitivity.
Wow, that's thinking ahead. Preparing it for interactions with real people.
It really is. And to round out the testing for Kingdom AI, there was a humanities final exam and a STEM reasoning test.
Okay, so testing its knowledge in both the humanities and sciences.
Pretty much. There was also a multimodal problem-solving assessment and a traveling salesman problem test.
Getting pretty technical there.
Yeah. And finally, an emergency management AI performance benchmark to see how it would handle crisis situations.
So a very thorough and diverse set of tests for Kingdom AI. What about the others?
Well, 90 AI, with its focus on creative generation, had tests that centered on the accuracy of its text and image generation.
Makes sense. Checking if it could actually produce what it was supposed to.
Exactly. And they kept in mind that whole hallucination thing with abstract prompts.
Right, making sure those didn't get out of hand.
For Palagemma, the vision and language model, the tests focused on its ability to connect text and visuals, recognize different objects, and understand context, particularly in those nuanced situations where it sometimes struggled.
So really honing in on its specific area of expertise.
Exactly. And AutoGPT, as you might expect, was mainly tested on its automotive knowledge, making sure it could answer car-related questions accurately, and that its database of vehicle information was complete.
No surprises there.
Right. Now, for Eglana AI, the sources don't actually detail any specific standalone tests for its core functionalities.
Interesting.
But it's safe to assume that its performance would have been evaluated during those collaborative challenges involving the whole Fab Five, like the problem-solving challenge and the real-time communication stress test.
So implicitly tested through its teamwork.
Exactly. So while Kingdom AI was definitely the most rigorously tested individually, the others were still assessed both in their areas of expertise and as part of the team.
That makes sense.
So to sum it all up for you, our listener, we've seen the impressive range of projects, solutions, and even products these Fab 5 AGI models were involved in. From tackling global-scale problems like the energy crisis to assisting with personal well-being and even streamlining processes for car dealerships. And we've also explored the sheer depth and breadth of the tests they underwent, covering everything from basic functionality to complex reasoning, self-repair, security, creative communication, and even ethical considerations. Hopefully this deep dive has given you that solid overview you were looking for.
And it really makes you think, doesn't it?
It does. Given all these potential applications and the rigorous testing they were put through, what do you think are the biggest implications of developing such advanced AI? What questions does this raise for you about the future of these technologies? We encourage you to explore those questions, maybe even dig into some of the sources yourself.
And who knows, maybe those explorations will lead to even more fascinating deep dives in the future.
Exactly. Until then, keep exploring, keep learning, and we'll see you next time.